we begin season 4 with an episode that, when it came to season 4, first off, the season's known as the breakthrough season, which we will get into that more detailed when we get to not the following review, the next review, but the following review when we get to the pitch. To me, season 4 starts off kind of like continuing on a 3-part story that ended in season 3 with the Keys episode, in which Jerry and Kramer have a fallout over Jerry's apartment keys, and Kramer then moves out to California to become an actor. Backstory was, I guess this was all also done because it was part of somewhat of a 3-part episode for the Summer Olympics, because they were going to be on NBC in 1992. So they kind of wanted to use the Olympics as an advantage. Well, NBC at least did. Apparently Larry David wasn't the biggest fan of it, but NBC wanted to take advantage of the Summer Olympics to get more attention on Seinfeld. So that's kind of why this is kind of like a 3-part thing. I believe, again, as I keep saying, this is the only time in the series they really had a cliffhanger and in the previous season to carry over into the next. There was a couple episodes where it was like, well, really only one other I could think about off the top of my head, which was season 7. Susan dies at the end of the episode. The following season, it was kind of like the fallout for it, but it wasn't so much like a cliffhanger because you knew Susan was dead. Although probably debating this is going to go to more investigation, but we're still ways away from that. So even though this is season 4, to me this still feels like this is still season 3 to me. Still wrapping up season 3, because the 3rd episode of this season is whenever the meat and gritty of this season really happens, and it was a big season for Seinfeld. A lot of people say this probably may have been the best one. My opinion also, it has not just one of the best episodes, probably the best episode in the series that won an Emmy, but one of my favorite episodes as well. Not the same one, but they're both still good. But so the trip, like I said before, this was a 2-part episode. Again, it was started with the fallout from Kramer moving out to California at the end of season 3, and again, Seinfeld used this multi-episode to take advantage of trying to get attention during the Summer Olympics. It was also the start of them, the series branching out more. They weren't just relying on everything inside the studio like they were. They were going to different locations. They actually went to actual Los Angeles. They even did in part 2. They even did a scene where they were driving in the car, but it was an actual car on the actual streets of LA, and not on a set with a green screen and whatnot. It wasn't any of that. It was all of them on set. They were branching out more. Of course, now is where I feel like they really got to show. This was a season, of course, where Seinfeld became the number 1 show, pretty much. So the story behind this episode, at the beginning, is kind of where they left off. Jerry and George are going into Monk's, and they were talking about how Kramer was on Murphy Brown, which George was stunned. He didn't know. And that's where he also told Jerry that Kramer had actually asked him originally to go with him to LA, but of course he turned it down. Jerry then brings up the fact that the Tonight Show had contacted him. They wanted him to be on an upcoming show. They gave him 2 free tickets to LA. So he asked George if he wanted the free ticket. And they decided while they were out there, they were going to try to find Kramer. And, Jerry wanted to try to make amends with him because he felt bad about their fallout with the Keys. So they were planning on that trip. Meanwhile, out in LA, Kramer is going to auditions. He is, he also has a movie treatment he's trying to pitch also, and trying to get people in on it as well. Basically, it's showing mixed bag results. It's meant to look like he's really succeeding, but at the same time, he really isn't. He had a private meeting with people, and he was showing him his script, and he explained something about how he memorizes things by color instead of by lines or something like that. They threw him out. He was staying at a very crappy hotel, and there was some older lady named Helene who seemed fascinated by him, but Kramer, seemed like he didn't really care too much. He was just very focused on, become the actor, getting his movie treatment out there, and to actually making a movie, which was literally called The Keys. Obviously, it was being based off of his experience with Jerry. So he's out there running about doing all that. Meanwhile, back in New York, Jerry and George are getting prepared to leave, which of course George severely overpacks, and Jerry was just we're only on a 2-day trip. What are you, Diana Ross? And then George is mentioning how he has to overpack because he has to dress based on his mood, which would be the many different phases, signs of George Costanza. And then, Jerry was like, "Well, what's this?" And George goes, "This is morning mist." And which of course I think ends up being in a blooper later on in the series. But then of course they go to the airport. They're all making jokes about the metal detectors, and then George gets through with no problem, even though the one security guard is going through his bag, kind of asking him some questions. Is there a knife in here? Whatnot. Jerry's not getting through without the metal detectors going off, so he literally had to be scanned and everything after taking all of his stuff out of his pockets. He says the famous line of "Ladies and gentlemen, I implore you," which of course I know I was told definitely don't say that in an airport for sure. Because when I went on a big gap between when I flew on a plane. The first time I flew on a plane was when I was 10 years old going to Disney World, which was actually took place a few days after Hurricane Charlie hit. And then the next time I flew on a plane was in 2018, so that was 12 years later. No, 14 years later, around there. A 14-year gap. So my parents no, don't say it as a joke. Okay, definitely not, of course. But yeah, when I went to metal detectors, so they hop on, they go to L.A., they check into the hotel. George is so mesmerized by the bathroom and everything else. Jerry, meanwhile, is on the phone trying to see if he can find someone who can help him find Kramer, which he had no luck with, and George not paying any attention to. So then they get, this is one of my favorite scenes. They have the chambermaid come to the door. She introduced herself as Lupe, which Lupe also, of course, is always an ongoing joke. Every time we talk about a chambermaid, a cleaning lady at a hotel, it's always Lupe this, Lupe that. That's always a reference in my family. She brings them towels. George then, while Jerry's still on the phone trying to figure out what's going on with Kramer, George is asking Lupe to not tuck the blankets in when making the bed, because he prefers he prefers the sheets loose. That way he can stretch out his feet. He doesn't like them all tight and whatnot. It's just one of his pet peeves. So then she's like, does he want one too? So then Jerry and George go back and forth whether or not Jerry wants a tuck or a no tuck. I'm tucking! I think you should go with the no tuck. Fine, put me out for a no tuck. You know what? Put me out for a tuck. Going back and forth, it was just priceless. But then Jerry also said he had a piece of paper, a napkin or something on a nightstand that had notes about a couple jokes he was going to tell at the Tonight Show episode. But unfortunately, it ended up being that Lupe threw it away. So Jerry was just grouchy about that. George kept sticking up for Lupe because Lupe was not going to be, Lupe was not going to be tucking in his blankets. Well, we hope so. So then, of course, meanwhile, Kramer's still, floating around. He went to an audition, and he auditioned for, several different things. And while there, he met a girl. And then he goes out to eat with the girl, and he tries to pitch his movie treatment. And she said she would show it to her manager. The girl's name was Chelsea. And, of course, at the same time, there was Kramer sees Frank Savage, which he was a big fan of his, and he was super nervous, so he tries to approach Frank Savage, give him a copy of his movie trip. He took it, but he obviously didn't seem very interested in it as well. Now, earlier in the episode, though, they found Chelsea dead in the woods, which, here's a nitpick I will say. I get that you can, show things earlier in the day, but to me, the way it was shot and the way it was sequenced together, it didn't give me that illusion as of, the girl that's dead is the same girl that Kramer met at the auditions. To me, it's it wasn't quite they didn't make that clear to me that was there. Because for the longest time, I thought that it was a different girl that Kramer had talked to, and a different girl in the woods. I'm thinking they're the same people. Why were they just suspecting Kramer? Well, spoiler alert for there. But to me, I felt they could have done a better. They should have done something a little bit better to illustrate the fact that the one scene happened earlier or happened later than within the following scenes. But to me, I feel like they didn't make that completely clear, in my opinion. They didn't say earlier that day or something like that, or you know what I mean, just to show that this happened before, because that kind of threw me off a little bit. So that all went down, and then Jerry and George were driving by, and they were just bickering about something. But at the same time, when they drove by, Kramer came out of a store that they had just drove by. Of course, they didn't see. He gets in the back of his car, and he drives away. But some of his photographs he got taken flew out, and I think it was a cop or something happened to walk by, pick up the photos, and he also saw a ripped piece of the movie treatment, the keys. And of course, the finding also is the part that was ripped off, it just said Kramer. So that was also a way of, foreshadowing the fact that Kramer had a first name. We just still did not know it yet until season 6, I think it was. Yeah, season 6 in The Switch, when we finally learned Kramer's first name. But that movie treatment, of course, was found on Chelsea when they found her dead in the woods. So now all of a sudden, they take it back and present it to Lieutenant Martell, who was a very vicious and strict and no mercy type lieutenant for sure, as he was just hungry to track down who it was who killed this woman, which they're calling it the Smog Strangler, as it's a similar cases to other other connections of other cases as well. So Jerry and George would then go to the Tonight Show. George was backstage before Jerry got started, and he had a couple conversations with Corbin Burnson and George Wendt, ideas for their shows. They were both, of course, on the Tonight Show, and George was watching, but they both went on the show basically saying, yeah, I was talking to this nut back there who thought there was this good idea about this, and this, or something like that. So obviously, George was kind of embarrassed by that. Then Jerry, of course, he goes out to do his jokes, but unfortunately, because he didn't have those couple jokes written down, he completely forgot, what they were, and he just blanked on stage. Meanwhile, at the same time, after seeing the Kramer started becoming a suspect for as the Smog Strangler, so they interview some people such as Helene, the woman who lives in the building. How they say how he's a very handsome man but strange, but she told me that he likes him. And then there was one of those that one freak hippies that Kramer rode with in that bus or whatnot, or back of that truck when he was traveling across the United States to get to L.A. in the Keys. He basically brings back how whenever they're talking in the truck, and he said, "Hey Kramer, dude, do you ever kill a man before?" And he goes, "Well, these hands were soaking in ivory for nothing or whatnot." So obviously, unfortunately, that was enough evidence. That was all enough evidence. They were out. They put out arrest for Kramer's a warrant for Kramer's arrest, and they're out to locate him and pick him up and bring him in, because he's now a big suspect, because his there was a piece of his treatment, the keys, that was found with Chelsea. So of course Jerry and George came out of the backstage of Tonight Show. Jerry was so upset that his act didn't go well, and George said, don't blame Lupe. So they happened to have a TV on in the back, and they just kind of wanted to catch the headlines or whatnot in the news. And there was the newscaster Keith Morrison on there, and they then showed Kramer's photo, and they say that an arrest warrant's been issued for a suspect in the Smog Strangler case, and they mentioned he is known only as Kramer. And then Jerry and George just look at each other, and that's where you see "to be continued," which that is the end of part 1. So Jerry and George were struggling. Of course, they came out there while they're out there. They're hoping to try to find Kramer, but they're having no luck. And unfortunately, this is how it ends up being with them finding Kramer. They find that he is the suspect in a murder. So now, of course, they know where to go to find Kramer. The police. And that's the end of part 1. I mean, I'll say this. Well, before I get into the trivia, a lot of people consider this 2-part episode the worst episode in the series because of the lack of comedy. To be honest, as far as a story itself being told, it's good, but I can't agree. This, especially with the part 2, it gets a little bit wacky and out of the comedy side. The content was good, but as far as being for a sitcom or a comedy, I kind of gotta agree that this isn't really. This is one of the least funniest episodes, I would say. It's a good episode. The storytelling and stuff is good. I do like the episode, but I wouldn't say it's a funny episode for sure. Especially when we get into part 2. Just a couple trivia facts though to mention about this episode. Well, first off, as we can tell, Elaine was not in this episode. Julia Louis-Dreyfus was on maternity leave, so she missed the trip part 1 and part 2. She also was not there for the pitch and the ticket. Well, I'm sorry, she was there, but she had a couple off-site shots, because her story was to show she was written off, and they slowly drew her back in. Was the fact that she was on vacation in Europe with her therapist, who she was having a fling with. But she returned, back with the gang in The Wallet and the Watch, which the first 6 episodes are all 2-part episodes in season 4. Also, the Michael Richards approaching Fred Savage was a real life experience inspiration by Larry Charles, who was nervous when he was approaching Richard Dreyfuss. This was also the first appearance of Ruthie Cohen at Monk's, the cashier, who, besides Newman, was known to have the most guest appearance in the series, because she was always in the background as a cashier. They never really gave her much attention, so there's a couple episodes, I think there was only one episode, where they kind of gave her a little bit of a story between her and George as well, but this was her first appearance. In the exercise video scene, there's a woman as an extra in there. Her name was Ann Tallman. That was actually, at the time, Michael Richards' girlfriend at the time. Let me see here. Yes, I already mentioned the thing about there was a piece of the keys that was ripped off that you didn't see. You saw just Kramer, which was supposed to be a foreshadow that Kramer does have an actual first name. We just don't know it yet. Let me see what we got here. Keith Morrison, who plays the newscaster, in real life, Morrison is actually the stepfather of Friends star Matthew Perry, who I think was Chandler. I always get him and Joey mixed up. Hang on. Matt Perry, Friends. Chandler. Okay, yes. I always get him and Joey's actor mixed up. And then also I completely forgot to mention this in 2 episodes, but in this episode, of course, is where we're first introduced to George preferring the blankets not tucked in when his bed is made. There was actually 2 foreshadowing scenes. One actually made the cut. One was a deleted scene. The one that made the cut was in the limo episode, when they were in the back of the limo just recently, where George was discussing how they both Jerry George discussed how they both dislike the blankets tucked in at hotels, and Jerry tells George they should make a run for it, and George said he has a hamstring injury from his blankets being tucked in too tight at a recent hotel he stayed at. They also kind of foreshadowed that in a deleted scene back in the Chinese restaurant, where George was telling a story before he picked up the phone to call his girlfriend Tatiana, and that's where he mentioned it there as well. And I completely forgot to mention that in both when I reviewed the Chinese restaurant and the limo, yes. But that is the end of part 1. We're kind of ending on the suspense again. The last time, of course, was will Jerry and Kramer mend their friendship at least? We're still wondering that because they still have not seen Kramer in person. Now they know where he's at. Will Kramer be proven innocent or guilty in the Smog strangling? We'll have to see. Find out next in my next review, which will be part 2 of the trip. So until then, guys, what were your thoughts on part 1 of the trip? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content to my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. And also I just want to say, I don't know when we'll be uploading this video, but I am recording this currently on December 23rd, which is Festivus. So all you Seinfeld fans out there, happy Festivus. So until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you guys all later. Have a great rest of your day. And peace out, everybody.